In the year 1964, Donald Campbell broke the land speed record on Lake Eyre, South Australia. Not content with this achievement, he decided to attempt the water speed record in the same year. With only hours to spare on New Year's Eve 1964 on Lake Dumbleyung in Western Australia, he succeeded. Not just one, but 2 world speed records in 1 year. A feat never to be repeated. 20 years later, an ingenious monument to this event was constructed on the shores of Lake Dumbleyung. This is a first-hand account of the man who designed and built this unique monument, Jack Fewson.
So Jack, thank you for inviting us into your home, and we'd like to talk to you about your experiences during the period of time when Donald Campbell broke the world water speed record in Dumbleyung. And he's the only person in history that's broken both the land speed and the water speed record in the same year. What are your recollections of that event?
When Donald Campbell first came to town, it was a very big event in our little town. People seemed to come from all over the state to witness his attempts on the lake. But he had a lot of trouble with ducks at various times flying up, and a lot of trouble with the wind whipping up the lake into a very dangerous state for his job he had in mind. At the time he broke the record, I was developing a bit of new land out east of Dumbleyung at Curingup. Just a little farm I wanted to break into. So I wasn't actually there the night that he'd broke the record, but I certainly knew all about it. It was well and truly listened to the whole time on the radio. It was being broadcast. Donald Campbell coming to Dumbleyung and breaking the water speed record the same year as he'd broken the land speed record was absolutely unbelievable. And so our little town got quite a boost. It was one of the best things that ever happened to Dumbleyung in a way.
And it put Dumbleyung on the international map?
Yes, all of a sudden little Dumbleyung, people around the world had heard of Kalgoorlie and Albany and Perth, but no one until then had heard of Dumbleyung. All of a sudden the world had knew of Dumbleyung. So we were pretty proud of our little town.
So can I ask you, what inspired your interest in Donald Campbell?
In Donald, it was, I suppose, more the interest of what he was doing for Dumbleyung and Australia. Come to our little backwater to do an important job like breaking world water speed records was pretty important to our town and to me. England, a few years later, saw the monument they had for Donald after he'd broken his water speed record, but also this particular time he lost his life in Coniston, and to me that was rather sad, but his glory moment was when he broke the water speed record on Lake Dumbleyung, because it made 2 records broken in the 1 year with only a few hours to spare between the final time of the year.
And I believe that was on the 31st of December in 1964 at 3:43 in the afternoon. Is that correct?
That's right. After witnessing that and seeing the little monument over at Lake Coniston, centralisation seemed to be drawing everything out of the country, and the country towns were diminishing. Different firms like PMG, SEC, post office, banks, even the banks withdrew and pulled their buildings out and went to bigger centres. So the little country towns were losing the battle. Our little town needed something to give it a boost, something to bring people back into that area. So the idea was to think of something that could make them think, oh, I'll come back and see how that's going. So I came up with the idea of having a light shining on a bluebird on a plaque of the outline of the lake. I put my ideas to the local tourist committee, and they were absolutely wonderful and helped me all the way through with it, absolutely. Right behind me.
When you made that trip to England and you went to Lake Connaissance where Donald Campbell lost his life, it was the plaque that you saw in his honour that inspired you to go back to Dumbleyung and do something to honour him in Dumbleyung. Is that correct?
Yes, that, and the mere fact that he'd only just broken his water speed record, we needed something for people to say, oh, I'll come back next year and see how that's going. So that would have a return for tourists to Dumbleyung, I figured. All little country towns were just starting to feel the pinch of the government taking all the extra facilities out, like PMGs and SEC coming to towns, which meant the closing of our powerhouse. Anything to get people back into the country was what the tourist committee was after.
Jack, can you give us some idea of how you accomplished the task of creating this monument in honour of Donald Campbell's record at Lake Dumbleyung?
Once we decided that we needed a monument and we needed something to attract people, thought came up that if I could get a rock the shape of Western Australia and have that as the basis, because Dumbleyung being a very small part of Western Australia. So I went out to the local quarry and picked out a rather decent sized rock in a reasonable shape that I thought I could carve up a Western Australia. Got the local Shire loader driver to give me a hand, and he brought the rock in from the quarry and dumped it in the Shire council yard. From there, myself, Ron Lloyd and Bob Jones sketched out a bit of a line on the rock as to what we wanted to knock off it to make it look a bit like Western Australia and the idea I had drawn up of the final monument. And we started chipping away at the various little places on the rock to shape it up, and we got it in a reasonable shape of Western Australia. Then the idea of how to make it the base of the actual monument to mean something was having a rock with a light coming through onto a bluebird down on a granite rock below it, about 8 foot out from the rock itself. I went out there 12 months before the time for the monument to be opened, and I built a great tripod up at the back behind where I needed the rock and put a big disc around on the top of it with a small hole in the centre. And from that small hole in the centre, I waited for the desired time, which was 3:43 on New Year's Eve. And at that time, the sun came through the hole down to the ground where the spot was pegged, and the height of the sun hitting it was recorded. With that information, I was able to get the angle of the sun every year at 3:43, New Year's Eve. I went back to the rock on the ground in the Shire yards and built a cradle to mount the jackhammer in at the right angle, and set the jackhammer going, and the hole went through approximately where we wanted. On the bottom of Western Australia, if you can take from about Esperance down to Augusta, each of the corners like that, we drilled rather large holes about 1.5 inches in diameter in each 4 corners of the rock. And then I got some large steel bolts and put them into these holes, which they fitted rather well in. They were the jacking points to manoeuvre the rock around on. From there, it was only a matter of getting the rock back out there. Out on Pussycat Hill, we dug rather a deep hole where I wanted the rock, and we poured quite a bit of concrete in, making a flat base for us to manoeuvre the rock on with our 4 jacks in each corner. The loader then had the job of taking the rock back up to Pussycat Hill and dropping it down with these 4 jacks in each corner onto this concrete base underneath. And then a string was placed from the tripod we had behind it down onto the spot on the ground, and the string was lined up through the hole we had, which meant it had to be at the desired time. There was a little bit of concern as to what size hole to have in the rock, as to how accurate we wanted the spotlight to be on the rock. Yeah, we tossed up a bit on that and ended up with about a 3/4 hole, I think it was, in the rock. Nice square granite rock was bought from Perth Monumental Service to sit on a flat base out on Pussycat Hill underneath. Then this brass plaque was cast in Perth, and it was a beautiful outline of the lake with all the skiing club and yachting club and swimming holes and outlets and inlets for the lake. And the speed course Donald Campbell had picked was also marked on the plaque. Then that was put in place, and the string was used once again to determine the exact spot for the bluebird on top of the plaque again. The rest's history.
So at 3:43 in the afternoon on the 31st of December every year, the sun shines through that little hole that you calculated onto the plaque of Donald Campbell.
If you can imagine the sun coming through a tube, it's going to reflect from the side to side, and at 3:43 it exactly engulfs the bluebird.
You were saying before that the hole that you actually drilled through the rock is at Lake Disappointment. Was that correct?
Yeah, approximately. If you've got a map, that's approximately on the shape of Western Australia where we have the light coming through the rock.
Okay.
Down, 132 miles north of Albany and 165 miles east of Perth is where Dumbleyung is situated, and there's a little brass plaque to distinguish our important town.
It's a wonderful story. Jack, can you tell us approximately how much this piece of granite actually weighed?
Somewhere about the 4 tonne.
4 tonne. That's a big piece of rock.
You wouldn't want it falling on your toe or anything.
No. Can I ask you why the hill is called Pussycat Hill?
I believe it was the last place that the native cats of Western Australia were seen, was Pussycat Hill.
You mentioned that a front-end loader carted that huge piece of rock up the hill. Can you tell us a little bit about that, please?
It's about the only implement we had around that could possibly have done it, and it only just made it then because as the front-end loader with the rock chained to the bucket at the front, the wheels at the rear of the loader was bouncing off the ground and spinning a bit because there's no traction. They were just getting off the ground. Yes, it was quite a hair-raising trip, and then the loader was grunting quite to get right up to Pussycat Hill with it.
But you managed to do that.
Yeah, once up there, the loader handled it, the hydraulic was strong enough to handle it up and down and jiggle it around until we got it where we wanted.
How many hours did that process take to actually get the rock into position?
About a day and a half, I suppose, we were positioning it, but there was hundreds of hours in preparing the ground for the concrete base underneath it.
Jack, can you tell us a little bit about Justin Bowen, who was the Shire Clerk at that time? He was instrumental in getting Donald Campbell interested in coming to race on Lake Dumbleyung.
I've got vague recollections of a local farmer realising that Donald Campbell had achieved his land record in South Australia and was looking around for somewhere, and he was quite interested in another decent expanse of water. I believe a local farmer came into Justin and said to him that Donald Campbell was finding it difficult to find water suitable for his water speed record to be broken in the same year as his land speed record. And the local farmer suggested to Justin that he get in touch with Donald Campbell and ask him if he was interested in coming over to Dumbleyung, of which I believe he took up quite readily and came and had a look and was quite happy with it but he ran into a few little problems like ducks on the water, and they had a lot of power boats go out with duck shooters on to try and eliminate the duck problem. But nature seemed to take its course. The ducks got scarce on the right time, and the wind died down enough for Donald to take it up just on the last day of 1964.
It was meant to be.
Yes, it was meant to be. Donald was ready to pull out and heading for his aeroplane to back out, and they went and caught him up and said, "It's a miracle. The ducks seem to have gone and the water is like a mill pond." So he came back, had a look and give it a go. Leo was his mechanic and his engineering part of the outfit, I think, and he was the one that was mostly in favour of Donald coming back and having a go. He did just that and broke the record very well. So,
And it just all happened. History was made.
yes, it was just one of those miracles that happened, and it all went well. There was quite excitement around the town that night. I believe the hotel would have sold plenty of beer that night.
Jack, why did you undertake this project?
It was entirely for Dumbleyung. I would like to make an acknowledgement to Terry and Karen Ward for the tourist committee approached them and asked them if it was all right to locate our monument on their property, and they gave permission.
Jack, it must give you a great deal of satisfaction knowing that your creation will stand for many hundreds of years. You will be remembered for your contribution to Dumbleyung and the community.
There's quite a bit of satisfaction in it, yes. Thank you, Patrick. You nearly had me crying, you bucket.
Judy, I'd like to thank you very, very much for the tea, the brownies, and the little meat pies. It's been a rewarding experience.
Very welcome. It's lovely to meet you all.